Hello everybody, it's Vertical Sandwich. Welcome back to Book Reviews. So, today, we have this. The Calculating Stars, a Lady Astronaut Story by Mary Robinette Kowal. I hope that's the right pronunciation of the last name. So, alright, so let's just read our back cover really quick. On a cold spring night in 1952, a huge meteorite fell to Earth and obliterated much of the east coast of the United States, including Washington, D.C. The ensuing climate cataclysm will soon render Earth inhospitable for humanity, as the last such meteorite did for the dinosaurs. This looming threat calls for a radically accelerated effort to colonize space and requires a much larger share of humanity to take part in the process. Elma York's experience as a WASP pilot and mathematician earns her a place in the International Aerospace Coalition's attempts to put man on the moon as a computer. But with so many skilled and experienced women pilots and scientists involved with the program, it doesn't take long before Elma begins to wonder why they can't go into space too. Elma's drive to become the first lady astronaut is so strong that even the most dearly held conventions of society may not stand a chance against her. So, here's the deal with this. First off, it's alternate history, right? But it's alternate history that diverges after World War II, right? So there were lady civilian pilots during World War II. This was a thing that happened. They were called the WASPs. You can look it up. One of them was actually, one of them was lost and never recovered. And the idea was that they flew non-combat missions so to free up men for combat missions. So that's the thing. And like I said, you can look it up. I did. And read little articles about it and stuff, and it was interesting. And like books that do that for you, that's like a nice bonus, right? It's cool. So the idea is that, yeah, in the 50s, so Eisenhower presidency begins, boom, meteor, east coast of the country just absolutely devastated. It's going to start a greenhouse effect that eventually will make the Earth entirely inhospitable. So NASA gets a giant kick in the butt and becomes like an international consortium, right? That's just trying to get people into outer space. So, and women did work as, like, in NASA, women did work as, you know, computers, which is a thing that we think of as, obviously, these machines that we have in our house, but at the time was a term that was, and may still be, applied to people who did the math, like for orbital mechanics and things like that in these programs. And that happened. I know that there was a movie a while back about kind of women's contributions to the moon landing in this kind of capacity. Okay. Those things being said, let's read a bit. And then I will tell you what my issue is with this. And then we'll go, okay? So, all right. So this is chapter 13, in case anybody's keeping track. Nicole Warden perched on the arm of the sofa in her living room, her glass filled with pre-meteor champagne. The diamonds around her throat glittered above a glorious peacock green dress. Around us, the living room was filled with the cream of society in tuxedos and rich jewel-toned evening gowns, enjoying the kind of food that a ration book wouldn't get you. If you couldn't hear what Nicole was saying, she might have been any society maven. Thank God she was more interesting than that. So the mechanic had sworn that the Hellcat was flight-worthy, but I was at 6,000 feet and my fuel gauge suddenly bottomed out. Over the ocean? Mrs. Hyber clasped a hand over her bosom in dismay. Earlier, she had regaled us with stories of how she saved her prize roses from the meteor winter through heroic use of glass and steam. Too bad she wasn't interested in growing vegetables. I'd saved us by prompting Nicole to tell war stories. That I had another agenda was beside the point. At the moment, we weren't hearing about aphid invasions. I'd heard Nicole's stories before, so I just sipped my cocktail and enjoyed the show as Nicole pointed a manicured nail at her. Yes, over the ocean. Well, I hadn't any other choice, but I had to circle back to the aircraft carrier and tell them I was coming in. No, without an engine? It was that or land in the ocean. When I landed, it turned out that the mechanic had missed a damaged fuel line. You should have heard the chief tear him up and down. Unpowered landings were part of training, but landing on an aircraft carrier was a whole other ball of wax. She caught my eye and gave a wink. Tell them about the Messerschmitts, Elma. I had been perfectly content to sit among the other women and listen to Nicole tell stories. But when your hostess invites you to take the floor, oh, well, We weren't supposed to be flying combat missions because it was too dangerous for women. Nicole snorted and shook her head. Not that the Germans could tell who was flying a plane. Exactly. So I was delivering a Mustang to the Ambaru and Bouget Air Base, and a trio of Messerschmitts come up out of nowhere. If you're French, I'm sorry for butchering that. I have no idea where that. The crowd around us had gained a few men, which I was hoping the topic would draw, but still, there was suddenly a lot of people listening to me. I took a sip of my champagne. Bear in mind that I was flying a fighter plane, but I didn't have any ammunition. Oh no! That came from Senator Morgan, who had joined his wife. He was a stout man who carried the weight well, beneath a full head of hair that was just beginning to gray. Oh yes! I had just enough time to radio for help, and then they started firing. All I could do was evade and hope to outmaneuver them, and of course the day was utterly cloudless. But there was this river valley that runs towards the base, and I thought that maybe I could find some cover there. Nicole leaned forward, which comes with its own set of problems, because you're flying low and there's no room for mistakes. But it was better than being shot at, so I'm tearing down the valley with this dratted German on my tail, and another one flying cover for him. I tried to demonstrate where the other planes were in relation to me without spilling my drink. I have no idea where the third is. All I'm trying to do is use the river bends to make sure they can never get a straight shot at me, and praying that our boys are going to find me in time. And clearly they did. Ah, the sound of smug masculinity. I turned in my chair. Actually, Colonel Parker, they didn't. Of course he'd been invited to the dinner. Senator Morgan was excited about the space program, so naturally he would want the first man in space there as another trophy guest, like Nathaniel. Nicole laughed at the look of shock on Parker's face. She got one of them to shoot the other, flew the second into a cliff, and what happened to the third? I never saw him again. I assumed that when our boys did arrive, they chased him off. Wait, Parker held up his hand. You're telling me you downed 2 Messerschmitts without ammunition? The nice thing about anger is that it overrides my anxiety about being the center of attention. I had the advantage of knowing the terrain. I'd been ferrying planes in for months and knew where the river forked. They clearly didn't. I don't believe it. Are you calling my wife a liar? Nathaniel does this thing with his voice when he's angry that always reminds me of my father. It gets very low and very controlled. Right now it was so tense you could have stabilized a rocket with it. He stood just behind me, only a few feet from Parker. No, of course not. Okay, so the idea of this is I mean, again, alternate history. It's about kind of this woman's this specific woman who becomes kind of a nationally famous person for wanting to be an astronaut. She has like a doctorate in mathematics. She's Jewish. Not that it matters that she's Jewish. She's married to this guy who works also in the NASA program. They are both in the same kind of field. And yeah, and she's a trained pilot. Okay. And she ends up going on a show called I don't know, Mr. Wizard something. A show that actually existed. It was worked in as kind of this thing. I really should know what show she goes on, but anyway, Mr. Wizard's World. That's not right. It's like explains something. I don't know. Anyway, but you again you can look it up. So the issue with this is that what bothers me. This is a well-written book. It's paced very well. It's a pretty quick read. It is only it's over 400 pages, but it doesn't feel like that. And there is a sequel. So The Fated Sky is the sequel to this book, and this book ends on a cliffhanger. I mean, she doesn't go into space and then the book everybody lives happily ever after in the book, and I mean, like, the world is ending. And this is a slow build-up kind of the political struggle of women for space exploration. Now, here's the deal. My problem with this is, and I know I complain a lot about invulnerable characters, about overmen, or in this case, I guess it would be overwomen. And Elma isn't one of those. Elma is an incredibly vulnerable, very human character. And I'm sure that's what the author was going for here. And that's fine. But she also has incredible anxiety problems that involve her anytime there is a conflict or she feels like she is causing problems for other people. She like loses her mind and she can't sleep, she can't eat, she starts vomiting, and she ends up on, I guess, the fictitious world equivalent of, I guess, of Valium, right? For kind of this. And so my issue then becomes, like, I get a couple hundred pages into this book, and I'm going, hey, there definitely should be lady astronauts, but not this woman. Like, no space program would put this woman as the first woman in space. Like, and it starts to strain credibility for me. That I just go, well, here's the thing, though, is this isn't an alternate universe, it's an alternate history. So I know, I have an idea of what these programs would require, like for you to be like a test pilot, or for you to be an astronaut. And that, like, when these problems come out and become obvious, she still kind of ends up working toward her goal. And at that point, you just kind of go like, well, here's the thing, though, is it wouldn't have strained credibility if her kind of push and her popularity had gotten one of the other WASP women who are in the program with her into space. It strains credibility that they would put her kind of into this program as one of the initial candidates. And that for me was bothersome, right? Is that I didn't have a problem with, is she a believable character? Absolutely. Are the things, based in a reality that we live in? Yeah, absolutely. Did I learn stuff about kind of women pilots in the 40s and 50s? I did. And I liked that. But where the plot went kind of made me go, yeah, here's the thing, though, now you lost me. Like, I'm all for women astronauts. I think women astronauts are an awesome idea. I think men astronauts are an awesome idea. I think any astronauts are an awesome idea. I want more people in space. Like, I just do. I want people on Mars. I want people in hibernation heading to, like, Bernard's star. Like, I want people in space. I just want people in space. I want people in space. More people in space, please. More people in space. Like, it blows my mind that we've had an International Space Station for almost 20 years. Like, the same space station for like 20 years. And as I speak, a private company just sent people to it. Rah! Like, amazing. That being said, I really think that Elma should have been, the 15th woman in space. Maybe not the first. That was my thing, is I was just like, man, the guys who run this program really... And maybe you can argue that there's some realism there, too. Right? That, like, politicians and program directors of things like NASA would probably send the most publicly visible woman, despite her disadvantages with things like anxiety. Because she's publicly visible, and it's good press, and what you want is people to support your programs. So I guess take it any way you want, but it bothered me how kind of wrecked she gets by anxiety. Because to be the first person doing anything is an anxiety-ridden experience, and I guess you could argue, because the author does make it very clear that her anxiety is about her relationship with people and not stress. That being said, so you can argue that, right? She's going to be fine. She's going to be fine. There's going to be problems on the mission. She's going to be really good. She's going to work with other people to solve them. It's going to be hyper-realistic. Like, The Faded Sky is probably, a good story. I can't imagine she just starts vomiting in her spacesuit, because that would be a huge issue. That being said, that was what I felt about it. That was what bothered me. It just bothered me. Even now, I kind of go like, man, I don't really think that... Like, I liked Elma, all right. She was okay. Like, but I actually liked some of the other WASP pilots better. Like, there's actually this character who kind of gets sold out as, like, she gets included in the program because she's a journalist. And there's, like, an exclusive contract sold to, like, Life magazine that involves including her. And all the women hate her. I loved her. I would have loved to have seen, like, her redemption as a pilot, and hopefully The Faded Sky delivers that, but I probably won't be reading it. I think that it went all right for me. This book just didn't kind of... Here's the thing, for science fiction, alternate history can be a drag, right? Like, I don't want to read about an alternate 50s unless it's super weird. Like, like a hyper-realistic one. I just feel like I'm in presidential biographies then. So, this wasn't for me in particular, but it is a Hugo Award-winning novel. It deserves that. It's a good book. It's incredibly well written. It's, it does exactly what it's trying to do, and it does really well. And I just had one character problem with it and found that the book gave me characters I liked a little better and then didn't focus on them, and then gave me one character that I was kind of like, nah, it doesn't really work for me, and just stuck with her, and that's fine. That's okay. That's where the author wanted to go with this. So, yeah, it's an interesting book if you want to learn a little bit about, if you want to read a kind of hyper-realistic alternate history about a meteor strike. The opening when the meteor strikes and they survive is really good. Is really good. I would watch a movie version of this. I would. And who knows? I might have just talked myself into reading The Faded Sky to see where this goes, but we'll see about that. So anyway, Calculating Stars, the winner in 2019, last year. This is the most recent Hugo Award winner as of this recording. So when we come back, something else, maybe another alternate history. Bye, everybody.